Why would Lucifer, the prince of darkness, leave his throne to fight over a corpse? What secret did Moses' body carry that shook both heaven and hell? Why did God send Michael, heaven's mightiest angel, to stand alone against Satan? Before we uncover this forgotten war between Angel Michael and Lucifer, support us by subscribing to our channel and liking this video. It helps us bring more Bible mysteries to light, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let us take you to the mountain where no man stood. And it came to pass, in the latter days of Israel's wilderness wandering, that the servant of the Lord, Moses, the son of Amram, ascended alone unto the heights of Mount Nebo, a man aged in years but not in strength, his eyes still sharp like the blade of judgment, his voice yet thunderous when he spoke. For though he had wandered long with Israel through wilderness and rebellion, the time of his departure was nigh, not by the hand of sickness, nor by the sword of men, but to be called home by the Most High. Moses, the man of God, aged 120 years, stood tall upon Pisgah's peak. His eye was undimmed, his strength unbroken, for the breath of the Almighty still burned in his bones. Yet the call had come, not of death alone, but of divine release. No longer was he to walk among the sons of men. Below him, the Jordan River wound like a silver serpent, curling through the valley of destiny. Across the waters, the promised land stretched wide, lush, radiant, flowing with milk and honey, a land he had longed to enter, yet one he would never step into. The Lord God, El Shaddai, spake unto Moses and said, Lift thine eyes and behold. And the heavens parted in vision, and Moses saw the whole land that was promised. From the lush valleys of Naphtali to the vineyards of Ephraim, from the shores of the western sea to the plains of Jericho and Judah, a land flowing with milk and honey, yea, a land that yet groaned for righteousness. And the voice of the Almighty thundered softly, This is the land I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob. I have let thee behold it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not go over thither. For thou didst smite the rock in anger, and sanctified me not before the people. And Moses bowed his head. He did not protest, for the judgments of God are just, and his mercy is everlasting. It was not cruelty, nay, it was divine justice. For Moses, in a moment of passion, had struck the rock instead of speaking as commanded. And though he had led Israel through Red Sea and Sinai storm, he would not lead them across Jordan's waters. Still the Lord loved him. Still the Lord honored him. And so, as the stars prepared to rise, the breath of Moses departed not in agony, but in peace. The earth did not tremble, nor did the skies weep. It was a holy departure. No priest anointed him. No sons laid him in a tomb. For the word declares, And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab. But no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. God himself buried Moses. The Lord himself descended in mystery, and the earth opened her mouth in secret. And there, in a place hidden from the eyes of all living, he buried his servant. But as the burial was made in the unseen places of Moab, all creation seemed to pause. The sky held its breath, the wind ceased its whisper, and a darkness stirred beyond the veil. For the adversary, even Lucifer, once the anointed cherub, now the father of rebellion, watched with ancient eyes. From the hour Moses was drawn from the waters of Egypt, the prince of darkness followed his steps, not in fear, but in fury. And now, though the prophet was fallen in flesh, his spirit drawn unto God, Lucifer rose from his throne of shadow. Shall I not seize this vessel? He hissed through realms unseen. This one who failed, this man of wrath. His body belongs to the grave, and the grave is mine. And so it began, not with trumpet or blade, but with a whisper across the realms. A trespass in the valley where no man walks. A a challenge not of flesh, but of dominion. For though Moses was dead, his story was not yet finished. And lo, the earth was still, and the valley veiled in mist. No trumpet sounded, no voice cried aloud, but in the hush of dawn, a darkness moved. It came not with horses nor chariots, but with silent defiance, creeping across sacred soil like a serpent long exiled. Lucifer, he who had once sung in the courts of heaven, clothed in jewels and fire, he who had stood upon the stones of sapphire, basking in the presence of the Most High, he who fell as lightning, cast from glory because iniquity was found in him. He now returned not to worship, but to seize. The air grew heavy at his coming, the rocks seeming to recoil beneath his feet. No shadow clung to him, for he was the shadow. Cloaked in a majesty twisted by rebellion, he walked with ancient rage, his eyes set upon one thing, the grave of Moses. He had seen where the Lord descended. He had heard the silence where angels had wept. He had watched as the body of the prophet was taken into the care of God alone. But though no man knew the place, he knew. For darkness is drawn to light, and corruption seeks to defile what is holy. Why would he come? Why leave his throne in the abyss to search for lifeless bones? Because this was no ordinary man, and this was no ordinary death. Moses had struck fear into Egypt. He had broken the will of Pharaoh. He had split seas with a rod, brought manna from heaven, and glory from the mount. His face had shone with fire. His voice carried the echoes of God's own speech. He was the keeper of the law, the bearer of covenant, the mediator of thunder. And though his body lay still, his legacy breathed. Lucifer desired not the man, but the meaning. If he could seize Moses' body, he could desecrate it. He could parade it before Israel, inspire idolatry, build a shrine to flesh, and fracture faith with religion. He would twist the memory of God's servant into a monument of shame, turning reverence into ritual, truth into bondage. He stood now at the unseen grave. The valley was silent, but to him the silence was an invitation. He stretched forth a hand, fingers long and cracked with darkness, to uncover what heaven had hidden. The earth dared not move. The wind dared not howl. All creation seemed to watch and hold its breath. Then, like a flash of holy vengeance, the heavens split. A light descended, not soft, but terrible. Not warm, but wondrous. Authority wrapped in fire, power clothed in silence. And the archangel stood between darkness and dust. Angel Michael, commander of heaven's host, descended in glory. Lucifer did not flinch, for his pride was strong. But something in him remembered. They had met before, and always the outcome was the same. This would not be a battle of swords, but a battle, and the trespasser had just crossed a line drawn by the hand of the Almighty. And behold, the air grew thick with unseen fire. Between the grave of the prophet and the outstretched hand of the fallen one, stood Michael, the archangel of might and mandate, clothed in celestial armor, his face like lightning, his voice like the hush before a storm. He needed no introduction, for every realm knew his name. He had not come with many words. He had not come with legions. He had come as one, yet he carried the weight of the throne eternal. Lucifer, once crowned with beauty, now cloaked in corruption, raised his voice. It slithered through the valley like smoke through broken glass, velvet, smooth, yet dripping with venom. "The body is mine," he said. He failed. He struck the rock. He disobeyed. He belongs to death, and death belongs to me. Angel Michael did not flinch. His wings did not stir. He made no argument for Moses' righteousness, for all men have fallen short. He did not rehearse the deeds of the prophet, nor list his victories. For this was not a debate of merit, it was a court of divine ownership. And Angel Michael was not the judge. He was the messenger of judgment. Then Michael spoke just one line. No sword, no sermon, no struggle. "The Lord rebuke thee." That was all. Yet those 4 words struck like thunder in the bones of the enemy. It was not the volume that shook the valley, it was the authority behind it. The voice of Michael carried the decree of the Ancient of Days. Not his own voice, but the voice of him who sits upon the sapphire throne, whose robe fills the temple, whose voice shatters cedars. Lucifer recoiled, not from Michael's strength, but from the source of it. He had heard that voice before, at the dawn of rebellion, when he was cast out from the heights. He knew what came next. There would be no plea, no compromise, no room to bargain. The rebuke of the Lord was final. Moses' body was sealed by covenant. Though he had failed, he was forgiven. Though he had sinned, he was still God's possession. And no power of darkness, no ancient grievance, no whispered accusation could undo what Yahweh had declared as holy. Lucifer, burning with rage, vanished into the shadow, his claim revoked, his mission thwarted. The grave was untouched. Michael turned, eyes like flame, wings stretched over the resting place of the prophet. He spoke no more, for heaven had spoken once, and once was enough. Thus was Moses defended, not by argument but by authority, not by merit but by mercy. And in that silent victory, a divine pattern was set. What God has claimed, no devil can possess. And the question echoed through eternity. Why did Lucifer desire the corpse of Moses? What would the prince of darkness gain from a lifeless frame, long drained of breath and blood? This was no mere grave robbing. This was strategic warfare. Moses was not just a man. He was a message. He was the one who had stood before Pharaoh as fire. He had brought plagues from heaven and split the sea with a lifted rod. He had stood atop Sinai in smoke and thunder and received the law written by the finger of the Most High. His voice had become the voice of judgment and mercy. His life, a covenant carved in flesh and stone. Lucifer feared Moses, not because of his strength in life, but because of his significance in death. He said in his heart, "If I can touch the body, I can touch the legacy. If I can lay claim to the vessel, I can corrupt the voice that once thundered with God's own words." For Moses, even buried, was a symbol that covenant could survive failure, that divine intimacy could remain even after man had stumbled. Lucifer hates that. He hates redemptive truth. He despises the message that says, "You can fall and still be loved." So he came for Moses' body to do what he always does: pervert, pollute, profane. He would have taken the remains and displayed them to Israel, turned the grave into a shrine, the prophet into an idol, the memory into a trap. He would have sparked a cult of bones, twisting reverence into religion, transforming the holy into hollow ritual. And beyond idolatry, he longed to mock God's claim. "If I can touch what God has hidden," he thought, "then I can mar what God has called holy." But more than that, Lucifer knew prophecy imperfectly but enough. He knew that Moses' role was not finished. He sensed that this body held more than history, it held destiny. He had heard whispers from heaven's throne, that one day Moses would stand again, beside the Messiah, on a mountain of transfiguration, bathed in glory, that his presence would point from the law to the Lamb. And if Lucifer could defile the body before that moment, he might derail the future. He wasn't just after bones. He was after the blueprint. To own the body was to claim the symbol. To corrupt the vessel was to confuse the people. To drag the past into disgrace was to sabotage the unfolding of divine time. Thus, the thief came to trespass, to seize what heaven had sealed. But he had not accounted for this. Moses had already been claimed, and where there is heaven's claim, there can be no hellish hold. And so it was, when Moses the man of God breathed his final breath, that no hand of man touched his body. No priest anointed his head with oil. No sun closed his eyes. No wailing women lifted lament. For his death was not of earth, and his burial not by men. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, but no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. Deuteronomy 34 verse 6. The scriptures declare it plainly, yet few pause to tremble at the truth. God himself buried Moses. No funeral procession followed. No monument was built. No stone bore his name. The one who split seas and shook nations was laid to rest by the Almighty in holy secrecy. Why? Why would the Most High conceal the resting place of one of his greatest servants? Because this was not merely about death, it was about preservation. God was not hiding a corpse. He was protecting a covenant vessel. He was shielding a symbol that still had chapters to write. For had Israel known the grave, would they not have turned it into a shrine? Would they not have burned incense there, built altars, and worshipped where they ought not? Would they not have remembered the man above the God who sent him? The Lord foresaw the trap, and so, with his own hand, he concealed the body from every eye. The earth opened in silence. The dust received what heaven had sealed. The winds hushed as eternity bent low, and the creator of life became the keeper of death. But more than concealment, it was an act of honor. Though Moses struck the rock, though he failed in anger, still the Lord called, still the Lord met him on the mount. Still the Lord showed him the land, the dream he could not enter. And still the Lord laid him to rest, not with rebuke, but with reverence. His body was not abandoned. It was secured. His story was not ended. It was paused. Heaven wrote a comma, not a period, because the tale of Moses was never just about Egypt and Sinai. It was about the eternal law, the living covenant, and the transition from shadow to substance. And so the burial was not merely a burial. It was a divine seal, a spiritual lock, placed upon a vessel that hell desired but could not touch. Lucifer would soon come. He would approach the grave with unholy intent. But the Father had already sent a guardian, and the dust that held Moses would remain untouched. For what God buries, he alone has the key. And it came to pass, in the deep watches of night, that a darkness not born of clouds crept into the valley of Moab. No star shone above, no creature stirred, for even creation held its breath, sensing that an ancient enemy had crossed the veil once more. Lucifer had arrived. Not with sword nor flame, but with the chill of rebellion clinging to his presence. He who had once stood among the stones of fire, he who had basked in the radiance of the throne, now cloaked in pride and vengeance, he moved like a wraith through the wilderness of silence. No beast howled, no angel sang. The air itself grew heavy, as if time recoiled from his steps. Lucifer did not need to search. He knew. Though no man had marked the grave, though heaven had buried the body in secrecy, hell could smell the covenant. He came not to mourn, but to steal, not to honor, but to desecrate. He desired the body of Moses, not for what it was, but for what it meant. A weapon, a symbol, a threat. If he could seize the flesh that had stood in fire, if he could defile the hands that had held the tablets of law, if he could drag the prophet's frame into corruption, he could distort Israel's memory, derail the prophecy, and mock the mercy of the Most High. So he came to lay claim. He stood in the valley, veiled in the silence of rebellion, and whispered into the shadows. He failed. He struck the rock. He belongs to death, and death belongs to me. And then he reached, his hand, dark, cracked with ages of pride, stretched forth toward the resting place. The very earth seemed to resist him, but he pressed forward. Lucifer, master of accusation, believed he had a legal right. He had done it before, entered the garden, deceived Eve, accused Job, tempted David, corrupted kings and kingdoms. And now he came again not to fight but to claim. But before his fingers could touch the dust, before corruption could kiss consecration, a voice, ancient and radiant, broke the silence. A wind rose, not natural but holy, and with it came Michael. The Archangel did not descend with noise. He He appeared with authority. His presence bent the air. His armor bore the glint of divine fire. His eyes were aflame with judgment and light. And between Lucifer and the grave he stood alone. Lucifer hissed, his voice woven with old venom. "He is mine. He failed your Lord. He is dust, and I claim the dust." But Michael did not tremble. He drew no blade. He made no threats. He spoke nothing. Yet, for what would come next would not be the voice of an angel, but the voice of the throne itself. And the valley held its breath. Between the grave sealed by God's own hand and the prince of darkness who sought to profane it, Michael stood, unshaken, unmoved, unarmed by sword but clothed in something far greater, authority. Lucifer's eyes burned with ancient fury. His form shifted like smoke and shadow, a fallen glory wrapped in pride. He stepped forward, voice like velvet soaked in venom. "He is mine," he said again. He sinned. He struck the rock. He dishonored the Most High. "The wages of sin is death, and I rule in death. Give me the body." Michael did not answer immediately. He did not counter with law, nor argue history. He did not recount the faithfulness of Moses, nor defend his record. Because this was not a debate of works. This was a matter of ownership. And heaven had already ruled. Then Michael, chief among the warriors of heaven, guardian of Israel, and defender of the sacred, opened his mouth. Not in anger, not in eloquence, but in finality. "The Lord rebuke thee." For words. That was all. Yet those 4 words struck the realm like the roar of 1,000 thunders. There was no need for blade or battle. No angelic army lined behind him. No miracles displayed. Only authority. "The Lord rebuke thee," a decree from the judge above all judges. The sentence did not belong to Michael. It came from the throne eternal, from the mouth of the Ancient of Days, from the will that spoke stars into existence. Lucifer flinched, not at Michael, but at the power behind his voice. For in that single phrase was the full weight of God's justice. The divine gavel fell. The case was closed. Lucifer had no claim. Though Moses had failed, he had not fallen from grace. Though he had struck the rock, he was still God's servant. Though dust now wrapped his bones, glory had sealed his body. Lucifer snarled, his pride wounded once again by heaven's order. He vanished in fury, not defeated by force, but by a sacred verdict. Michael said no more. He stood as sentry over the resting place, the keeper of a prophetic vessel. For though Moses had died, his body would not remain forever in secret. It would rise again. It had purpose still. But for now the decree was enough. "The Lord rebuke thee." With those words the war ended. Not with blood, not with fire, but with divine finality. Thus did heaven teach the powers of darkness. What God has sealed, none may touch. What God has claimed, none may own. And it came to pass that the valley where Moses was buried was still. Yet in the spirit realm tremors echoed. For though Moses now rested in dust, his name struck fear into the halls of hell. Lucifer knew it. The demons knew it. Even the earth knew it. Moses was dangerous, dead or alive. Not because of his might with staff or sword, but because of what he represented. He was not just a prophet, not just a lawgiver. He was a divine message in human skin. A man who touched both fire and failure, yet remained in covenant with the Almighty. And that, above all things, was what made him terrifying to darkness. Moses was the bridge between heaven and earth. Moses stood where none dared stand, upon Mount Sinai, amidst thunder and flame. He entered the smoke where God spoke, and emerged with the law in his hands and glory on his face. Lucifer had once walked among the stones of fire in heaven. He had seen the throne, heard the voice, basked in divine beauty. But Moses, a mortal man, had stood where Lucifer was now banished from. To the enemy, this was an insult beyond imagining. How dare clay touch what? Moses turns slaves into a nation. Lucifer builds kingdoms of bondage. He delights in chains, in cycles of fear, in inherited torment. But Moses shattered those chains. He broke Pharaoh's back with 10 divine strikes. He walked Israel through the sea, turned slaves into sons, and gave them law, land, and legacy. This made him a threat to every system of darkness, because one man in obedience to God had undone centuries of demonic architecture. Moses failed, but was still chosen. Lucifer's strategy has always been accusation. He points to flaws. He reminds men of sins. He whispers, "You're disqualified." But Moses defied that strategy. He murdered a man in Egypt. He struck the rock in anger. He doubted, he feared, he failed. Yet God still called him friend. God still showed him the promised land. God still buried him with his own hand. This is what hell could not accept, that grace could redeem even the broken. Moses proved that God's love does not abandon his own in their weakness. And if such mercy existed, then Lucifer's entire kingdom, built on shame and guilt, was under siege. Moses would rise again. Prophecy whispered what Lucifer feared, that Moses' body would not stay buried, that he would one day appear beside Messiah in glory. Lucifer understood pieces enough to fear the puzzle. If Moses stands beside the Christ, the law stands beside grace. The shadow meets the substance. The story comes full circle, and that terrifies hell, because it means Moses wasn't finished. So yes, Moses was dangerous, not for what he did only, but for what he symbolized. Deliverance from bondage, intimacy with God, redemption despite failure, a future that could not be stopped. Lucifer didn't fear the man. He feared the message buried in the man. And that is why he came. Though the dust of Moab wrapped the body of Moses, heaven did not forget him. His soul was gathered to the Lord, and his body, hidden by divine hands, was not abandoned to decay, but preserved for something eternal. For there was a secret the enemy feared, a mystery that echoed from Sinai to Zion. Moses must rise again, not just in spirit, not merely in memory, but in a real and visible return, in a moment when the veil would be torn and the Son of Man transfigured before witnesses. Lucifer knew just enough to tremble, for God had whispered to prophets and angels about a day when law and grace would meet, when the one who received the commandments would stand beside the one who would fulfill them, and when the mountain would once more blaze with glory, not of fire and smoke, but of the Son of God revealed in his majesty. That day would come to be called the Mount of Transfiguration, and Moses had to be there. Some may ask, why Moses? Because he was the embodiment of the law. He received the tablets from God's own hand. He carried the covenant of Sinai. He laid the foundation of righteousness through obedience. Yet he also bore the burden of failure. He struck the rock. He died outside the promise. He tasted both holiness and consequence. Lucifer saw this and sought to defile it. If I can claim the lawgiver's corpse, he reasoned, I can corrupt the law itself. But God, in his wisdom, hid the body, for glory yet to be revealed. Why not leave Moses in the open? Because Israel, in their zeal, might have worshipped the man instead of the message. Lucifer would have turned the tomb into a temple. He would have built a shrine and stoked idolatry, turning reverence into religion. The law was not to be entombed, it was to be fulfilled. And so heaven sealed the body away, not from man only, but from the schemes of hell. Centuries later, upon a high mountain in Galilee, the Son of God stood clothed in light. His face shone like the sun, and his garments glistened as no earthly white could match. And with him stood Moses and Elijah, not as visions or shadows, but real, breathing men. Moses, the law; Elijah, the prophets; Jesus, the fulfillment. It was the convergence of covenants. Had Lucifer succeeded in defiling Moses' body, The scene may have been marred, the message disrupted, the prophecy derailed. But he failed. Michael stood guard. God preserved the vessel. The grave was protected for the sake of the kingdom's unveiling. So Moses stood again, not in shame, not in judgment, but in glory. His life, though flawed, had not ended in failure. It was woven into prophetic destiny. What Lucifer tried to bury in dishonor, God raised for honor. What he sought to twist, God used to testify. And so, even now, the body of Moses declares, the story is not over when the grave is sealed. For in God's plan, every death is a doorway, every burial a planting, and every servant, no matter how broken, can rise again in glory. And behold, when Lucifer trespassed the valley of Moab, no trumpet sounded, no thunder cracked across the skies, yet heaven stirred. For a fallen prince had come seeking what was not his, and the grave of a prophet lay in silence. But from the throne of God came no army, no fire from heaven, no host of 1,000 seraphim. God sent one, not Gabriel the messenger, not a host of cherubim, but Michael the Archangel, heaven's warrior prince. And this choice was no accident. Michael was the enforcer of divine verdicts. He was not merely an angel with strength. He was heaven's champion of justice. When Lucifer, once bearer of light, became the architect of rebellion, it was Michael who rose with sword unsheathed, not to negotiate, not to reason, but to war. Revelation 12 declares, Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Michael is the one dispatched when the enemy steps too close to the holy. He is not a messenger, he is a firewall. He does not plead, he enforces. At Moses' grave, God was not hosting a debate. He was issuing a verdict. And Michael came bearing that decree. The Lord rebuke you. That one sentence crushed every accusation, silenced every claim, and drove Lucifer back in fury. Many will say, why not Angel Gabriel? Gabriel bears messages of hope and revelation. He spoke to Mary. He explained visions to Daniel. He heralded birth and destiny. But this was no birth to announce. This was a trespass to confront. This required not a word, but authority. Michael is not sent to explain, he is sent to stand. Why not a legion of angels? Because when God's authority speaks, one is enough. The presence of Michael alone was a declaration. This ground is holy. This vessel is God's. Your claim is void. Michael came not in his own power, but as the embodiment of divine order. Lucifer's rebellion is chaos. Michael's presence is order restored. Why Michael and not the Lord himself? Because God does not debate thieves. He sends his officer to remove them. Lucifer's presence was an illegal intrusion. He had no right, no contract, no covenant. And so Michael did not argue. He did not recount Moses' righteousness. He did not stoop to debate sin or grace. He simply declared the divine ruling. The Lord rebuke you. It was not Michael's might that made the devil flee. It was the authority behind his words. He spoke on behalf of the throne, and all of hell knew it. And so it is with all who belong to God. When darkness comes to lay claim to what heaven has sealed, when the enemy accuses and demands, God may not send thunder or legions. He may send one word, one defender, one holy presence that speaks with the weight of eternity. Michael was enough, because God had, though the valley of Moab lies silent to the human eye, though the grave of Moses remains hidden beneath sacred soil, the battle that was fought there continues to this day, in shadows unseen, in realms beyond flesh and blood. For that moment was not isolated. It was a mirror, a revelation of the war still raging over every servant of God, past, present, and future. Lucifer's defeat at Moses' grave did not end his schemes. It only exposed his strategy. He is not just after the living. He is after the legacy, the calling, the echo of your obedience long after you've gone. The enemy accuses what heaven has approved. As he accused Moses, so he accuses us. They sinned. They failed. They're unworthy. They don't deserve to finish well. But the judge of all the earth does not argue with the accuser. He rebukes him. When Moses could not defend himself, heaven did. And so it is today. There are battles being fought over your name, your calling, your assignment, even when you are unaware. Lucifer looks for legal ground to stand on. He wants to reclaim what God has redeemed. He seeks to resurrect the past, to weaponize guilt, to turn yesterday's failures into today's prisons. But like Michael, heaven still stands watch. Unseen battles for visible people. Daniel prayed and fasted, but the answer was delayed. Why? The prince of Persia withstood me 21 days, said the angel. But Michael came to help. Michael again, not only for Moses, but for all those who carry prophetic purpose. Today, believers face opposition not because they are weak, but because they are marked. You feel the resistance because you carry weight. You feel the delay because your life matters in eternity. And Lucifer fears that. Hell does not attack the uncalled. He did not come for Joseph's bones. He did not trespass Elijah's whirlwind. He did not demand David's tomb. But Moses, he came in person. Because some lives are so intertwined with God's purpose that hell cannot afford to leave them alone. If Moses' legacy could shake Egypt, then your obedience can shake your generation. Your legacy is not yours alone. Lucifer did not fight Moses for Moses' sake alone. He fought to interrupt prophecy, to alter future encounters, to confuse the line between law and grace. So too, the war over your life is not just about you. It's about those you will reach, the generations that will follow, the testimony that will echo from your life long after you are gone. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6 verse 12. This is not myth. It is not poetry. It is reality, invisible but unceasing. But take heart. The same Michael who stood at the grave stands ready still. The same throne that issued rebuke over Moses speaks over you. When the accuser rises, the verdict of heaven remains. This one is mine. You have no claim. The Lord rebuke you. And if God will send his mightiest angel to defend the bones of a fallen prophet, what will he do for you, who live in covenant, sealed by the blood of the Lamb? Let the heavens bear witness, and let the earth not forget. Lucifer did not war over Moses' soul, for that belonged to God. He warred over the legacy, the vessel, the testimony sealed in dust. He came not to rescue, but to ruin, not to redeem, but to defile. And so it is today. The serpent's schemes have not changed, though his tongue may whisper in modern tones. He is not merely after your present breath. He is after the echo of your obedience. He wars over your story, your calling, your name, even after you are gone. For to the enemy, a buried saint is not a quiet one. The body is sacred. Hear now this ancient truth clothed in eternal light. Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost? 1 Corinthians 6 verse 19. Your frame of clay is no common vessel. It was shaped by divine hands, breathed upon by the wind of God, and consecrated by his calling. If God would dispatch Michael to defend the bones of Moses, do you think he will not move to protect your purpose, your influence, your legacy? He shall. For you are not only a soul, you are a story, a living scroll being written for the generations yet unborn. Legacy is a battlefield. Lucifer did not attack Moses in life with this kind of fury. But when Moses was gone, he came swiftly to corrupt, to twist, to turn memory into mockery. Why? Because sometimes a life lived for God becomes more dangerous after death. A prayer you prayed may bear fruit decades later. The word you spoke may ignite a heart long after your voice is silent. A life surrendered can ripple into eternity. This is why hell rages at remembrance. The devil wants your failures to outlive your faith. But God seals the righteous in remembrance. Heaven still defends what hell cannot touch. Moses did not rise from the grave to rebuke the devil. He was silent in death. But heaven spoke for him. And so shall it be with you. There are battles over your influence, over your children, over the soil of your impact. You may not see them. You may not feel them. But heaven does. The eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong on behalf of them whose hearts are loyal to him. 2 Chronicles 16 verse 9. Even when your hands are folded in sleep, heaven watches, heaven wars, heaven defends. You are marked by God. Do not think lightly of your journey. Do not believe the lie that your story ends in silence. If God buried Moses with his own hand, if God stood guard over dry bones, if God raised the dead unto glory, then he will defend your calling, preserve your legacy, and rebuke the devourer for your sake. So when the accuser comes pointing at your past, mocking your weakness, whispering, "You failed, and you'll be forgotten," lift your voice in holy remembrance and declare, "The Lord rebuke thee, for you are not just alive in time. You are anchored in eternity. Your legacy is not yours alone. It belongs to the King who called you, who covers you, and who shall one day raise you in glory." And so the tale draws to its holy end, not in despair, but in victory sealed by the hand of the Most High. Upon the forgotten soil of Moab, where no man marked a tomb, where no chisel carved a name into stone, heaven made a decree that ripples through eternity. This one is mine. And though the enemy came cloaked in fury, though his tongue dripped with accusation, he was turned away by a single sentence. The Lord rebuke thee. You belong to the Lord. Beloved, understand this divine truth. You are not just a soul adrift in time. You are not merely dust wrapped in weakness. You are claimed, called, sealed by the King of Kings. If God buried Moses with his own hand, if he sent Michael, heaven's warrior prince, to guard his lifeless frame, will he not also watch over your life, your destiny, your end? Indeed, he shall. For your life is not your own. You were bought with a price. You are part of something greater, a covenant forged in blood, a purpose stretching beyond the grave. The devil fights hardest after you've run your race, because he fears the echo of your obedience. He fears the legacy of one who walks with God. He fears the ripple that outlives your breath, the testimony that sets captives free long after your name is spoken no more. But what God seals, Satan cannot steal. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. Psalm 116 verse 15. Heaven remembers, heaven records, heaven redeems. Moses may have fallen short of the promised land, but he did not fall short of glory. Let this be your charge. Walk boldly though your feet are clay. Pray fervently, though your voice may tremble. Obey faithfully, even when no one sees, and live as one who is marked by God. For indeed you are. The enemy will accuse. He will tempt. He will seek to pervert your purpose and poison your past. But do not answer with fear. Do not bow to shame. Stand as Michael stood with authority not your own. Say it aloud. The Lord rebuke thee. That sentence is still the sword that silences hell. Moses died, but he was not discarded. He was hidden, protected, preserved, for a future encounter on a mountain of glory, where law would stand beside grace, and the sun would shine with eternal light. So to your life, it may be bruised, it may have missteps, but in God's hands, it is a vessel of wonder, a part of a grand design woven into the fabric of redemption. When your race is run and your breath is gone, he will not forget your dust. He will remember your name, and like Moses you shall rise again in glory. For even if hell comes knocking, heaven already holds the key. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are His. Live unshakably. Die faithfully. Rise gloriously. Amen. So now, beloved, you've witnessed the untold war, where angels contend, where legacies are guarded, and where a prophet's bones carried more than memory. They carried purpose. This story is not just about Moses. It is about you. If God fought for His body, He will fight for your destiny, your calling, your future. Let this truth sink deep. You are sealed. You are watched. You are His. If this story stirred something in your spirit, don't scroll away. Like this video to declare you are unshakably His. Subscribe to join us as we uncover more mysteries of Scripture. Comment below. What part of this story lit a fire in your heart? You never know, your words might be the light someone else is praying for. The war between light and darkness is still unfolding. And you, yes, you are part of it. Until next time, stay watchful, stay grounded, stay unshakably His.